Dave Briggs back here live at the New York International Auto Show at the Javits Center in New York City. To get a broad overview of the entire EV space, we talked to Elizabeth Krear. She's the Vice President of EV Practice at J.D. Power. Talked about a couple of things: trends in the EV space, limitations towards mass adoption, and also the surprising automaker that is surpassing, in some cases, Tesla when it comes to brand consideration. But we started out with Elizabeth talking about Jeep and the rapid rise in their popularity since we've come out of COVID. Listen to what she told us.
Jeep has such brand loyalty. People love Jeep. And I think this one behind us is a 4xe, so it may be attracting some of the consumers that are looking for that EV option.
Seems to be that transfer from goods to experiences. People want to get out and live and travel, and that fits that. So let's talk about the EV story, which really changed in 2022 with market share nearly doubling. What happened?
In 2022, there was an influx of new EV alternatives. So prior to that, it was primarily the premium segment, but in 22, a number of SUVs and truck EVs entered the market, something that we call mass market, and that really attracted a lot of new buyers.
There's still about a $12,000 price gap between gas and electric. How is pricing changing, and how is that increasing EV market share?
Price matters. Price absolutely matters. Total cost of ownership is very important to the consumer. And since last year, that number was $20,000 gap. This year, it's actually 11. Our latest numbers show an $11,000 gap. And that continues to be offset with federal tax incentives, utility incentives. There's a lot of players in the ecosystem that are helping to bring that cost down.
How important is that sub $30,000 level, primarily represented by that Chevy Bolt?
That's absolutely important also, to have a vehicle that's less than $30,000 that's an EV. And oh, by the way, that doesn't even include all of the money that the consumer is going to save over the life of the vehicle as they're using electricity instead of gasoline.
And Chevy moved into the number 2 spot in terms of U.S. EV sales. What do you hear from consumers about GM and Chevrolet?
We actually talk to new vehicle shoppers every single month, and we ask them, are you interested in purchasing an electric vehicle? 27% say yes, very, very likely. And the number one brand has consistently been Tesla, but the last few months we've seen Chevy overtake them in brand consideration, and Ford is right there behind them.
Wow, I bet that worries Mr. Musk a little bit, not what he wants to hear. So what's the biggest stumbling block, roadblock between really mass adoption of EVs?
The number one hesitation is infrastructure. Consumers, the current owners, primarily charge at home, but they want the confidence to know that charging is going to be there in the public, where they need it, when they need it, at the speed.
Where is the biggest problem, the biggest gap when it comes to our charging network? And can it possibly get where it needs to be by 2035 when California and New York begin to phase out gas-powered vehicles?
What we're seeing is what I call a shotgun approach. There's a number of stakeholders that are implementing charging. I think what we need is to make sure that it's in the right places. Where is the demand? Where is the adoption of EV happening? And making sure that charging is where the consumer is going to need it. So location, time is critical. Also reliability. The chargers have been declining in reliability. 1 out of every 5 charging experience is a failure due to reliability. So that needs some improvement as well.
That's a shock. How are the automakers, how are the consumers going to be ready by 2035 to phase out gas-powered cars? Because it's still more than 90% of market share.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody, that's the question that everybody's asking, right? But we do see automakers, we see utilities, we see governments, we see everybody taking a vested interest in the transition, and we're here to help that transition and make sure people have the information they need so that we get to the number as we need to, and we know the changes that need to happen.
Where do you think market share will be by the end of the year and by, say, 25 or 6?
Glad you asked. 2026, we anticipate forecasts that the market share will be 27%. Yeah.
So what's the story this year in EVs that you're most focusing on? What's next?
I think it is what happens now that we're moving into the next phase customer. It's no longer the early adopter. There's a lot of mass market vehicles, and it's seeing how many of them, as the supply chain issues get resolved, because right now it's difficult to get them. There's announcement of them, but when consumers go to buy them, they can't get them. As that frees up, now we've got market scope. There's selection for them. Let's see how fast that market share rises.
And you can tow up to 10,000.
That was Elizabeth Krear, Vice President of EV Practice at J.D. Power. The one car that says we're moving towards mass adoption of EVs is right behind me. And it, of course, is the sub-$30,000 Chevy EV Bolt. More automakers need to find an answer for that. We're going to take a quick break here. And on the other side, we'll talk more about the importance of pricing in the EV wars.